My special guest today is Jeroen Corthout. He's the co-founder and CEO of Salesflare, an intelligent CRM built for small to medium businesses selling to B2B and most popular with agencies and SaaS companies. Salesflare itself was founded when Jeroen and his co-founder wanted to manage the leads for their software company in an easier way. They didn't like to keep track of them manually, and so they built Salesflare, which pulls customer data together automatically. It's now the most popular CRM on Product Hunt, and it's also top rated on review platforms like G2 Crowd for its ease of use and automation features. Jeroen, welcome to the Go for Launch podcast.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's start by asking, I ask all my guests, where are you in the world today?
I am in Antwerp in Belgium today. So It's the second biggest port of Europe. It's also the place where about 80% of the diamonds in the world pass, and the second biggest city of Belgium after Brussels.
Love it. And it's we're talking on September 15th. This will come out a couple of weeks from now in 2020, amidst of COVID, of course. But what's the weather like in Belgium today?
Today it's 33 degrees Celsius, and I'm converting that to Fahrenheit as we speak, which is 91 in Fahrenheit.
Oh, wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
quite warm.
It's a very warm September day for us. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, listen, Jeroen, I want to have you start by giving us an indication of how you got into business and what led to you founding your current company, Salesflare.
Yeah. So my first job was in pharma as sort of a product manager, but I never really super loved that. I got into that job because I believed it was going to be like starting my own business. Like I had my own product and stuff, but it wasn't that way. It was very, very limited in terms of responsibilities. So I moved to a marketing consultancy that helped pharma companies to get sort of into the new way of doing marketing. And they were using Salesforce internally. And Salesforce was my very first CRM, so I took it very seriously. People told me that it would help me organize my sales and all that. So I really tried using it for sales follow-up, but I just didn't manage to make it work for me. And I also noticed that it didn't really work for any of my sales colleagues either. It was very good for management reporting, and our CEO loved it. Like he could see the contacts we put in, got the newsletter, and he could see the opportunities in our pipelines. But for us, it didn't help us sell. So I personally used Outlook, and I used Wunderlist for selling, but I didn't use Salesforce. Salesforce was just, I'm communicating with my boss kind of. So I didn't do anything with that insight for a few years until I was working with my co-founder in another software company, and we had a ton of leads to follow up, and I knew Salesforce wasn't going to help us with that. So we had a good look around. We tested different CRMs, and where all these CRMs failed, apart from not helping with selling, was the data input part. Like if we didn't actively fill them out, then they became useless. And at some point we always forgot, and then we had crappy data in there, and it just didn't make sense to use the CRM anymore. And we were wondering, like, why is it that people expect us to be this sort of robots that perfectly fill out a CRM? Where does the expectation come from? And why are we duplicating data that's already in other systems? Because basically we would send an email and then go in there and say, I sent an email, or have a meeting and then go in there, I had a meeting. While, for instance, that email is already in your inbox, the people you're in contact with are in your inbox, there's their email signatures, there's the connections you have with them, how strong they are. There's the same as in your calendar, there's stuff in your phone, there's stuff in email tracking and web tracking, there's stuff in company databases. And we saw this system that sits on top of all of that data and makes it super easy for salespeople to curate that information. And then, back to my first point, also would help them follow up their leads just by seeing, for instance, like you were last in touch with that company that many days ago. So it probably makes sense to follow up now, because otherwise you're going to lose them because they're in that stage. Or there's this email that you haven't responded to yet. all these kind of things Salesflare helps with. And it tries to help you sell. So let's say our biggest mission was when we started Salesflare was to help salespeople focus on their customers with a very easy and automated system, so they can perfectly follow up and don't disappoint anyone without spending any time on the robotic tasks. And that's still our biggest mission today.
All right. Well, there's a lot there that you said. Obviously, number one, Salesforce is sort of the 800-pound gorilla, I guess we would call it, right? And it's been around a long time. It's extremely powerful, but what people don't realize is it's just, out of the box, it only does so much. And typically you have to spend a ton of time customizing that, so it can get quite expensive. But to your point, it also doesn't do a lot of automatic gathering of data. So to your point, you make it easy and automated. That is an Achilles heel for salespeople. Like you said, they don't like, I've met a lot of salespeople and worked with a lot of salespeople. Typically, they don't like entering data. That is not selling stuff. That is administrative time off the clock, right? So for them to, like you said, Jeroen, stop and have to say, I had a meeting, now I have to log the meeting. I had an email. Did I remember to blind copy my CRM or not? Was I supposed to copy my sales manager? And this could be days later where they forget. And if they didn't write it all down, and then suddenly they're spending 3 hours having to backtrack and hustle and put all their data in and make sure they get it all in so that they can make their sales numbers, report to their boss, etc. And so it sounds like you surveyed the landscape. In addition to Salesforce, there are a lot of CRM products out there, but even when you looked and tried other products, you didn't find that. So you had the audacity or the chutzpah or whatever to say, well, if it doesn't exist, I think I could create it. Now, were you more on the technical end of that, saying that I think I can build it, or did you go look for a technical co-founder of sorts to say, let's see if we can build something better?
Yeah, I'm the business co-founder of the two. So my co-founder and I, like I said, we were working on another software company. So we were already like in the same room thinking about solutions. I was around business intelligence. So we were working on data, but more analysis of data. And when we were trying to sell that, like we came back from a huge conference in Vegas, an IBM conference. We had software that was compatible with IBM software. And we had a lot of leads and wanted to follow them up. That's when this came about. I remember vividly that we had this idea of like, why are we filling out this data? On the one hand, and on the other hand, I just started a newsletter for our prospects. It was called #BI, stupid name, but I had just sent out the first newsletter in MailChimp. And I showed my co-founder Lieven like how you could see like this guy has opened it, this guy has clicked, and this kind of things. And he was all like, "Wow, you can do that." And then we saw that actually, like on the marketing side, there's a lot of tools available in terms of marketing automation, tracking things, and the data all looks pretty good because you can organize it so well. But on the sales side, that's where this Achilles heel is. If salespeople don't fill out their CRM, which one there's too much data input, and second they don't get anything back for their data input, then the whole system fails, and it also even fails on the marketing side because marketing people also rely on the information that salespeople have been filling out to properly work together and to send the right campaigns to the right leads. Like for instance, not send any offers to current customers and simple things like that. That only works if the data is working. And there are so many companies losing so much money on one is lack of data and not knowing anything about it, not having the insights, but also a very simple issue of not following up properly, because there's no like standard tool within the company to do that. and everybody has their little homegrown system. Like every single salesperson has theirs, and the one writes it maybe in an Excel sheet, and the other one has an A4 paper on which he adds some cues for himself. Or I've seen it all when doing customer interviews, and that's not a sustainable way of managing your sales pipeline.
Sure. So when you and your co-founder were initially formulating this concept and you had an itch you needed to scratch, let's put it that way. You
Mm-hmm.
had a problem, you had leads and you didn't want to enter them. So as you started to develop this system, were you thinking
Mm-hmm.
that you were just going to solve your own problem, or were you also building sort of a minimum viable product thinking that you might go ask other people if this would be something that they would use and pay for?
No, we immediately saw it was a bigger problem and one that we could solve for other people. We were the first users of our software, and actually for a while we were the only ones using it,
Right.
because we were very committed and other people weren't yet. But no, we immediately had a bigger thing in mind where we would build a system and sell it to others.
So did you go to other people and start doing focus groups or surveys or things like that to
Yeah,
ask, what are you using now? What do you like, don't like? If you had something better, what would that be? Was that
yeah.
the thought process you went through?
Yeah, no focus groups, but customer interviews, yes. I mean, I did, I think around 40 at the moment we started. So at initial stages, we thought about making a sales platform actually that we would sell to bigger companies that would connect to something like Salesforce. Uh, so I interviewed a lot of people in mid-size and larger companies in different roles to understand, and also different sort of industries there, to understand their view on sales software and CRM, and what was working and what was not working and what was important for them and how they manage these kind of things. And that gives a lot of background and afterwards to shape our software in the right way. But that's in the very initial stages. That was initial sort of input. While then over time, when we started developing the software, then we would do surveys to people like if you would have this kind of budget, how would you distribute it over these features that are often asked? And then people would do that, and in the end, we would get the results, and then we would know exactly what to focus on. And this has shifted over time to actually now we have an overload of feedback because we have so many people using the software that it's more a matter of when something comes in, to then have a chat with that person to understand very clearly what it is they want. That it's not just I want this and we don't understand why. To get that out and then connect it to similar questions, so that we can group the questions, then start prioritizing. We have a model for it, to then define which are the top ones, and then see what will fit when in our development pipeline. So this kind of thing all shifts across the journey.
Sure, I can imagine that is definitely a problem. The more users you get, you start getting all this feedback. I want it to do this. I want it to do that. And I
Mm-hmm.
always look back to the guys that started Basecamp as, like idols of saying no to the customer
Yeah.
and saying, we're going to do it this way. If this fits you, great. If not, go build your own thing, right? But you got to say no at some point. You just can't
Yeah.
accommodate every user's request, or else the thing would be so bloated and difficult to use. And you're all about simplicity, I can see,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, so let me ask you this, Jeroen, though, when in the early stages, when you were ready to start offering the product to those initial users, how did you overcome that inertia that people have when they go, you know what, we've been using Salesforce or something else. We're sort of, we feel stuck with it because we've already used it. We're paying for it. We've entered all this data, and change is hard, especially in
Mm-hmm.
software. People don't like to make changes. It makes them nervous. They've got to go to their boss and go, hey, we'd like to go pull out our money and go with these two guys in Belgium that no one's ever heard of and give them our money. the boss is going to go, who are these people? What is Salesflare? So how did you build that initial trust, in terms of doing trials with people or helping them migrate their data? What was it that sold people on, you know what, I'm going to cut the cord with Salesforce and use Salesflare now?
Yeah. First of all, if they were happy users of another CRM, they probably weren't a good early adopter. Usually people were unhappy users. So I remember very well our first customer. They had Microsoft Dynamics, but none of the salespeople were using it. And the sales director had a problem, and he was like thinking like, how do I solve this? And then he saw this article on a marketing website. Some journalist that interviewed us and described there that it was a CRM that kept itself alive. So one day he just calls us and he like, I read this thing. How does this work? But then in initial stages, it would all be very sort of be involved in every step of the way. So that person would call, I would explain everything to them, why we started a business and all those kind of things. I would give a demo. Then after the demo, I'd be like, do you want to be on the software? We would switch screens. We would sign him up on his computer. Then I would show him around, make sure that the data from Dynamics get perfectly imported, So the whole process, we would completely guide. For the first customers, we even had like a list of things they wanted to come on board. That was still a thing back then. Now, of course, that we cannot do that anymore because we have so many. We cannot put one in front of the other or something. But in the initial stages, those are some things you need to do. Yeah. So.
Well, let's talk about for a second a little bit more about Salesflare, because it looks fantastic. The fact that, like you said, it makes it easy. People don't have to duplicate entries, which is ridiculous. You're having to go back in your Gmail and figure out what did you email and copy, some random string on Salesforce or somewhere else. Talk about some of the other features, though, of Salesflare, such as lead generation and also lead nurturing, which are two huge things for salespeople, especially in B2B.
Yeah, so for instance, in the lead generation sphere, we have a thing called workflows. And basically, you can send personalized emails at scale. You just import a bunch of leads, or you maybe already have a list in your CRM. What you can do there is then filter it out specifically, and then set up a sequence of emails that will go out from your inbox. And it can, for instance, keep sending until somebody replies. These emails can be personalized with any of the data you have in Salesforce. You can say, hi, first name, how's it going at your company? Put the company name. Then maybe you fill out a custom field with some number or a personalized sentence or whatever. And they seem fully personal. So nobody can distinguish these emails from coming from you manually. Which makes that salespeople can get much higher productivity when they're reaching out. I remember I once had a call with a guy who was doing this all manually. So he would take the first person, put the email address in the to, then the subject line, paste from Word his template, adapt it, send one email, then do the next one, then do the next one, and he would,
Yeah, that doesn't take any time, right? That's not efficient. Wow.
Yeah. So we sort of replace that with software. Most people nowadays know that this exists and use tools for it. The difference is with our tool is it's all straight in the CRM, so you don't need to push data around, and you can just use the filters that you have there, and all the data also gets back in the CRM, including all the tracking. When it comes to lead nurturing, we really help salespeople to follow up actively with, for instance, this kind of reminders that I talked about earlier to help you know that a deal is slipping or that there's an email that still needs answering and this kind of things. That's all built into the software to help you never drop a deal.
That's great. And I also noticed that you guys have some really beautiful dashboards so that at a glance, it's almost like a Kanban board where you can see deals that are, early stage, in proposals, in negotiation, or all the way down to have been closed, that type of thing, which is really
Yeah.
cool. Let me ask you this about starting a SaaS product yourself. What have been the highs and lows of starting a SaaS company?
Um, some of the highs are often when you reach a new revenue target, or you bring in a nice new customer. Especially the new customers are some of the best moments when it's one you're particularly proud of, or it's a bigger one or something. Launching cool new features is also great as well, especially if some of the bigger ones, and getting all the feedback from customers for that. The more difficult moments are often on the interpersonal side, when you, for instance, hire someone that doesn't do the job properly, and you're like trying to make it work, wondering whether it will work, wondering whether you need to fire that person. Those are some of the hardest moments, I would say.
Did you guys build a team, assemble a team and build it yourselves in Belgium, or did you outsource or still do anywhere else in terms of some of the development?
No, it's fully internal. So we build everything ourselves. We have full control over how it all works, and we're sure that we won't be stuck at some point because we don't know how it's built, or the one thing doesn't fit on the other. If you're building something that is more than just a simple software system, I think the best thing is to keep it all internally.
Sure. Now, you launched in when? Was it 2016 or 2017?
We launched a few times. So our first customer was so we started building in 2014. Our first customer was in 2015. We launched our online version in the sense that you could just sign up for a trial and use it in 2016. Before that was all through me. In 2017, we did a launch on Product Hunt and one on AppSumo. And then, for instance, this year we launched this email workflows feature. We do a launch every now and then.
Okay. So I was trying to think in my mind, 2017 was before GDPR, correct? Like,
Yeah.
you've had to deal with that, big issues that have come out, like data security and data privacy. Has that had a big impact on how you've had to structure your security of the system, for example?
GDPR had some impact there. What also had an impact was last year, Google started requiring extensive security measures when you connect with a Google inbox. And we do. So we now go through a strict yearly review with some security companies that Google has picked out. And we also have the vulnerability disclosure program. So we constantly work on security now. GDPR was mostly on the privacy level, I would say. We had to restructure some things and add a few new features to make it all GDPR compliant and have the necessary contracts and all that. That also was some work. Yeah, there's something every year, some surprise.
Sure. Another thing, I've talked to a lot of different SaaS companies, and I know no piece of SaaS software sits by itself. It always has to integrate with a lot of other things. Can you talk about some of the major things that Salesflare integrates with? Obviously, the Google Suite, Gmail, Calendar, and stuff like that. But I'm curious, especially about how it interplays with things like Seamless.ai or other systems like that help you actually extract leads out of LinkedIn or elsewhere. Because I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't think that that's part of Salesflare. You're not helping people find the leads and put them in the system, correct? They need to have a list or build a list themselves.
Yeah, yeah. You can find any company in the world through the search function. When you type a name, you need to know the name. Many people work is they source leads on LinkedIn. That's nowadays the best source for leads. Like you have you make a leads list with a filter. You find exactly the people you want to go after. Then probably the best option is to either contact them there or scrape the list, find their email addresses. It's not allowed by LinkedIn, but there's no other way of getting data out of LinkedIn. So,
Yeah,
and then
there's a few. Like I said, I love Seamless.ai. That's a great
yeah,
system. It works, for as long as it will. But I'm sure LinkedIn is constantly changing parameters and making it
yeah,
harder for.
exactly.
And that's a little tricky. Another thing that people have done that's kind of a no-no these days is actually buying a list. That's typically not a good idea. What do you say to people
Oh.
that say, should I go buy a list of 30,000 prospect names and dump them in Salesflare?
Uh, I personally don't really trust that, and it's often very, very expensive. While with just scraping LinkedIn is probably the cheapest thing you can do. Using a tool like Seamless.ai or many of the others out there, sort of an in-between option when you like find that lead or something. When you don't want to do it yourself, buying lists is very sort of old style of going about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you need to have a lot of insight into how the data is gathered, how old it is. Is it actually properly your target, or is it sort of approximating your targets? There's a lot of questions you need to ask yourself before putting down the money.
Right. Now, in terms of having your own website, though, I imagine that if you're a Salesflare customer, you can probably embed sign up forms, correct? That would tie into your Salesflare CRM. Is that accurate?
You can install website tracking on your site. Forms we don't offer
Okay.
because people generally have another form, and we don't want them to all replace it with a Salesforce form. So whatever they have in their site, usually it can hook up through Zapier with Salesflare, but it depends. In most cases, we recommend people to either integrate what they have with Zapier, which is usually possible, and otherwise replace it with something more modern in terms of form, and then they can go all directions with it. They don't. They are not only tied to Salesflare; they can also get it, for instance, in Mailchimp or in whatever.
Got it. Now, I think when you and I connected to do this podcast, I think that you
Hmm.
reached out to me through Salesflare and said, "Hey, I noticed you were checking out our website. So, do you have an integration with some sort of tracking software that will allow you to see companies by IP address or whatever that
Yeah,
go
yeah.
visit?" Yeah, that's very
That
cool.
was that was actually with LeadWorks.
Okay.
So LeadWorks detects people on our site. It disregards existing accounts, so it's not gonna send current customers or whatever. It's not gonna list those. It's then for these companies, it's gonna find the right people. So you can set filters on the types of companies you want to focus on, and also on the types of people at these companies. And then it will actually push those automatically to Salesflare. So it pushes the company with the right people, and it puts an opportunity in the pipeline. And then with the email workflows feature in Salesflare that I talked about earlier, I put a filter on all new contacts that are added to a certain pipeline, and then it automatically sends a sequence of emails. So I think you got both emails, like because you didn't reply to the first one.
Okay.
Um, and then it's sort of like, hey, I saw you're on your site. We have LeadWorks running on the site, and are you looking for a good CRM? Or and then people often reply to that or to the second email.
I love it. So you're using LeadWorks, which is another third-party tool.
Yeah.
Those are great because, again, a lot of people don't realize there are tools like that. It's amazing to me when I talk to businesses. They say we really don't know what kind of traffic is coming to our websites. Like you should. You could know the names
Hmm.
of the companies or individuals. They're blown away. But I wanted to come back and ask you. You mentioned AppSumo. I'm a huge AppSumo fan, which is a place where people can go and get deals on software. So you can sign up for free, but then people like Salesflare companies typically put out these deals. You had a killer deal a few years ago. I think it was $39 or something for like a lifetime
Hmm.
account. It sold out quickly. What was your experience with that, working with AppSumo? Obviously, you got a ton of customers, but I'm curious, is it worth doing it, considering the massive discount that you have to offer?
It all depends. It all depends on whether you can actually it will create marketing value for you or not. So you have to imagine that AppSumo sends an email to 1 million people, and of these, a small percentage signs up for your deal. Our deal was, I think, one free user and all others at 50% off. So it was not fully free. But that helped us because we actually, compared to many other AppSumo deals, we did make quite some upsales from it. But then next to that, what you can expect is one, well, if people like your software, which is a prerequisite, of course, you will get a lot of word of mouth. You can get many more reviews on review sites. You will get a ton of feedback. A nice thing about people that buy AppSumo deals is that they are sort of, they have an interest in your product becoming better, so they will provide you with a lot of feedback. While many paying customers who bring you your actual revenue, they pay you every month, but they don't care. They just don't provide you feedback. So it's very weird. So some people
that is weird.
pay you and don't give you feedback, and other people don't pay you, or they paid you once. Well, yeah, of which you got a small part. And they provide you with a lot of feedback, which is super handy as well.
Nice.
But in general, I would say it gave us sort of the cloud to grow quicker. That's what AppSumo mainly did for us. And if you're thinking about doing an AppSumo deal, I would say 2 points of advice. No, 3. One, is your product right for their audience, which is, first of all, a lot of agencies and a lot of small agencies, if I have to generalize. Second, can you somehow create more visibility through it? Like, for instance, if you have a video calling platform, the more people use your software, the more you'll be visible and the more sales you'll make. Is there that kind of effect or not? Because that will make an AppSumo deal much more interesting. And then third, what will it cost you to add this amount of users on your platform that won't pay you monthly? Does it require a whole lot of support or extra hosting costs or integration costs or whatever? Then maybe don't do it. But if you can take it, I mean, in many SaaS products, the marginal cost is not very big. Then it might be a good option.
Well, it's certainly amazing for the buyers, like myself. I mean, I think of some of the deals that I've gotten over the years on there, and I'm surprised I missed Salesflare, to be honest, because I looked back on it before this interview and I was like, wow, I don't know. I don't remember seeing that because I probably would have done that, but that's just my fault, right? I wanted to ask you, as we start to wrap up, in terms of your own sales for Salesflare or marketing, if we will, what are the activities that you deem to be most effective in terms of getting the word out, attracting leads for Salesflare?
We still focus very much on making our customers happy. That's number one, probably. We thrive on a lot of word of mouth. So we have people who worked in a company that used Salesflare and then moved to another company and get Salesflare there, or tell it to people that they know. That happens very often. Secondly, we do a lot of content marketing. That sort of has evolved over the years, but lately we've been focusing that on content that both can get a lot of Google traffic, but is also very interesting for people if we share it on social media. So it's sort of written with these two purposes. And a thing we're trying out right now also is getting on lots of podcasts like this one,
sure.
Which seems to be working as well, but it's early on. I've been on about 40 podcasts now, and our sales are great over the last 2 months, but I can't really make any big conclusions yet, especially because everything about podcasts is so opaque. Like, you have no idea how many listeners you can expect. You have no idea where people are coming from. Everything is super hard to track.
Sure. Well, speaking of that, where can people learn more about Salesflare?
Yeah, so you can find more about Salesflare on our site, That's salesflare.com, and Flare is with Flare. And you can start a trial there if you want to see the software. It's trials are anywhere between 7 and 30 days, depending on the amount of steps you take in the setup. It's sort of gamified. If you want to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. There's only one person with my name, so you can't miss.
Yeah, it's
I'm
spelled
sure.
strangely, and well, strangely, just for me. But I'll
Yeah,
make sure Jeroen, I'll put it in there in the show notes over at goforlaunch.io/show104. I will link to your LinkedIn page there as well, and
yeah.
SalesFlare. So yeah,
Maybe a note. Include a note if you're connecting with me. Otherwise, I have no idea that you came from this podcast, and then it's very hard to distinguish you from the spam. But if you put a little note that says you come from the Go for Launch podcast, then I'll certainly connect.
yeah, and you'll give him a killer discount, right? No, I'm kidding. No, he probably won't give you the AppSumo deal, but you can ask. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, right?
Please don't. Yeah.
Please don't. Well, Jeroen, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Congratulations on your continued success with SalesFlare.
Thank you.